Ross Williams. I'm a businessman here in Grand Rapids, and I'm not really a technology guy, and so a lot of what I'm going to say you probably have already heard, already thought about, but I think it's sometimes helpful to repeat it to people who are looking at the trees, that there's a forest out there, what it is that we really need broadband for. I spent no time worrying about technology, but a lot of time being an advocate for the use of these technologies to make our communities stronger, better, more vibrant. And the question of how we do that in the future is something that I think is very important, and broadband is a piece of that. The new economy is a knowledge economy. That's a combination of both information, which people get over the internet, but also experience, how they apply that knowledge, that information in their work, and more importantly, how they use that knowledge and their experience and their information in innovative ways in the world, in a collaborative way with people all over the world. Because today things aren't just happening here in one place. That innovation happens by working with people everywhere. And the example I would use, 20 years ago, of course, the internet was something that was on college campuses and in the military. 10 years later, I was at a conference in Portland, Oregon, talking about e-freight. And the person there, that's Intel has major operations in Portland, and the guy from Intel came and he said, you know, we don't worry about how fast we can get stuff out. What we worry about is knowing exactly what Dell is selling today, so that our plant in Ireland, our fab plant, that can be producing exactly the right chip, the chips that are being bought, and not be producing a chip that's not going to being sold. In other words, tightening the noose between the customer and their manufacturing to the point that on a daily basis they can adjust their manufacturing to fit the needs of their customers ultimately out in the field. That was 10 years ago. I don't know what they're doing today. I have no idea. And we don't know what they'll be doing 10 years from now. Probably some 15-year-old does, because that's where the technology starts, is with the next generation that's thinking about what's going to happen down the road. So when we look ahead, I think what we have to understand is that as the baby boomers retire, we're going to be looking to the next generation to be more productive than we were, just as we're more productive than the last generation, largely based not on the fact that we work harder than our parents did, because most of us probably don't, but because our parents left us a legacy of tools, infrastructure, things that they did that we can build on, so that we're more affluent, more productive than they were. And we need to leave that for the next generation. We need to leave behind that same tools so that they can be more productive, so that we can live in retirement and we can still live in an affluent society with fewer people working. And what that means for rural Minnesota and for people up here is that our kids can't have to leave town and go to the cities if they want to make use of their skills and their talents and their creativity. They have to be able to use those skills here. Because if you don't have those kids using those skills in this part, we're not going to be able to produce the same amount of goods and services. And that's going to mean, regardless of how much we save for our retirement, we're not going to have those goods and services to purchase. So this isn't really about the technology or about whether it's Quest or the cable companies or who delivers the service. It's really a question of us providing technology for the 21st century. The stuff that we're going to need in order to be productive, wealthy, affluent society, not to catch up with what's going on in Korea, but to get ahead of what's in Korea, to provide the opportunities that America has always provided to people. And that is, I think, the big picture. And what that really means is that when you look at this in the long run, what you're really looking for is unlimited bandwidth at almost trivial cost. So that in fact, the question of whether the bandwidth is available is not a factor in people's personal lives or in people's business decisions. And the question of what it's going to cost isn't something people ask any more than they ask whether they've got a phone available. Yes, there are costs, and they need to be figured out how they're going to get paid for. But in the end, it's really providing those tools so that people can be innovators in the new economy that's going to determine whether or not you're successful. 20 years from now, people can look back and say, okay, do we have the infrastructure we need to be doing the things we want to do in the state, all over the state, in every community, for every person who lives here? And are they all engaged in a way that's productive, that's providing the goods and services that we all use? So that, I think, is really the challenge that you've got, is how do you provide that service? How do you move to that level of service? rather than worrying about whether this community has only dial-up or the rest of it. How do we get fiber optic cable to every household? If that's what's needed, I don't know, I'm not a technology person, but if fiber optic cable is needed to every household in the state, then we need to figure out how to get it there. And one last thing, it doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense. I've got fiber optic cable to my house in Grand Rapids. It doesn't seem to me to make a lot of sense that Quest is gonna come along and put in another fiber optic cable into my house. At some point, you have to look at this and say, that's not real. And it doesn't really make sense that I've got a cable coming in from the cable company, I've got twisted copper coming in from Quest, and fiber optic cable coming in from Paul Bunyan, and they're all keeping their little proprietary hands on that one piece of hardware. That just isn't gonna work in the long run. So I think you need to think about the question of how do we get some kind of common carrier service that makes sense for people rather than us having 3 different cables coming into our house, whether they're different kinds of cable now, but in the long run, three fiber optic cables or 4 or 5, every provider providing one, that makes no financial sense. It's not gonna happen. It's not economically viable. And it's just, so that's now I'm getting off onto my diatribe. Thank you very much.